Want help to grow your business? Download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.
Hi there, my name is Dermot Crowley. Welcome to the Masters of Business presentation. I'm going to talk to you about productivity in the modern workplace today. So just a little background on myself. I've been in the productivity game for going on about 20 years. I'm originally from Dublin. I came out to Australia when I was in my mid-20s. And back in those days when I started working in productivity, there was no Microsoft Outlook, there was no laptops, there was no iPhones, and there was certainly no email. And productivity back in those days was a much simpler affair. We used to basically use paper diaries to organize ourselves. And back then, a paper diary basically was enough to get us organized. It's funny to think back on this, but we actually didn't have that many things to remember or to organize back in those days. But things changed. When email came into the workplace, probably around 15, 16 years ago, very quickly we moved from paper tools to electronic tools. And when we made that shift, suddenly the amount of things that we needed to manage increased enormously. So the volume of email that we started getting back then was still pretty low. You know, I reckon that in the early days, most people were getting maybe 10 to 20 email messages a day. I now work with people who are getting up to 600 emails a day. And that's on top of a day full of meetings and many, many interruptions. So the pace of business has really, really changed over that time. And we really need to make sure that if we're going to get ourselves organized in today's modern workplace, we need to be taking advantage of the modern tools at our disposal. And this is the big problem that I tend to find. Most of us do have the technology at our fingertips. We've got computers, either a laptop or a desktop. We've got great software like Microsoft Outlook, or you might be using something like Gmail. You've probably got a smartphone, a tablet PC of some sort, and some of you may even have watches that are linked up to your computers as well. So we've got all the technology at our fingertips, but the problem is we're not leveraging that technology or really taking advantage of it to get organized in the modern workplace. So today I'm going to talk you through what I think the 7 mindsets are that are going to really boost your productivity. Because it is really about how you think about your work and how you think about the systems around you to get yourself organized. So I'm going to talk you through 7 key things that I think will make a huge difference. Okay, now, you're going to spend maybe the next 45 minutes watching this video, and I know that it's hard to take time out to learn, but this is the return on your investment. You invest that little bit of time in this presentation, and this is the sort of payback that you could get. I reckon people who implement some of the ideas I'm going to talk about will get about an hour a day of more productive time. And I'm being really, really conservative here. You'll easily get an hour back if you implement. Now, what that equates to is approximately 20 hours per month, which in itself equates to about a month per year. That is 22 to 23 days of more productive time if you implement these ideas. So massive payback, massive return on investment. So why not sit back, relax, watch the video, and then think about, okay, how could I make some changes to my mindsets and to my tools to make sure that I'm working as productively as I possibly could be? Okay, so I was looking in my inbox quite recently, and I came across a blog by Seth Godin, who, world-renowned author, and he basically suggested in this blog, what if your organization wasn't actually dealing with the latest crisis of the day, but instead really thought about what it could do to build a future for tomorrow, to do something truly productive, to do the really, really meaningful work. That's at the heart of what I want to talk about today. So for me, getting organized and leveraging technology is really about freeing up our time and our attention so that we can do the really meaningful work. Because you've all got the same problem. You've got this much time, but you've probably got this much that you need to do. And when you've got way more to do than you have time available, then you really need to focus and prioritize. And I want to help you to prioritize on the really meaningful stuff that's going to make a difference at the end of the day. Now, I reckon that I've worked with, possibly 25 to 30,000 people over the last 15 years, and I've seen a lot of what makes highly productive people tick. And I reckon there are two key things that all highly productive people tend to strive for. The first thing is having a proactive work style. So actually working in a timely way, not reacting to everything, but making sure that they're being as proactive as they possibly can, and they're working ahead of themselves. They're trying to get ahead of the curve on the really important stuff. The second key thing is they tend to focus on outcomes. We want to make sure that we are focused on the really important stuff. Again, we've got a lot of noise coming at us every day, and that noise tends to distract us, and we can end up being extremely busy throughout the day, but not actually be focused on the right work. And that's a real time waster. So we want to work proactively, and we want to focus on outcomes. Now, if we put those two things together, this model, I think, describes it very, very nicely. Now, this bottom left-hand quadrant tends to be people who are driven by inputs rather than outcomes. So inputs would be your email, things like alerts on your phone, interruptions. So if you're very focused on inputs and your work style is highly reactive, that's what I call the messy work. Okay, that tends to not only be unproductive for you individually, but it also tends to drag down the productivity of all the people around you as well. It gets really messy in a workplace where people are working in this bottom quadrant. Over in the next quadrant, we have people who might be proactive, they might be organized, and they've got some good systems in place. But the problem is they're focused on the wrong work because they're really being driven by their inputs instead of their outcomes. So again, we can be extremely busy all day, but we're not focused on the right work. And this is what I call the busy work. And it's not really where we want to be either. Up in the top left quadrant, you've got what I call the hard work. So these are people who are very, I suppose, outcomes focused, but the problem is they're extremely reactive. And I see this a lot, especially when it comes to senior managers or in smaller businesses. Quite often the business owner is one of these people. Because as a business owner, you're very focused on the outcomes, what you want to achieve. But the problem can be that you've got a very reactive work style. And if that's the case, you could be like a bull in a china shop. I was working with a team recently where I was training the team, and they were describing their director to me. And they said, yeah, that's exactly him. He's very outcomes focused, but extremely reactive. And the problem is that we spend most of our time walking around behind him, picking up all the pieces, because he is totally out of control. He causes havoc wherever he goes. So that's not really where we want to be working either. For me, the most productive people work in the top right-hand quadrant, and this is what I call the smart work, which is also the name of a book that I've written on the subject and published recently. So people who are working smart are outcomes focused, but they're also working more proactively and less reactively. And in this very reactive world, where we're being driven by email and we're being driven by the next meeting or the next interruption, it's important to dial down that urgency just a little bit and make sure that we're really working in a more timely way. So really everything I'm going to talk to you about in this presentation is going to be helping you to achieve those two things: outcomes focus, proactivity. So how do we actually do this? I'm going to draw this on the flip chart because I reckon that if you want to work productively in the modern workplace, there's probably 3 things that you really need to focus on. Now, the first of them is what I call your actions. So when it comes to your actions, you're going to find that you basically have 2 types of actions that you need to manage. Doesn't matter what your role is, it doesn't matter what type of a business or an industry that you're in, everyone's got 2 types of actions. You've got meetings, and when you're not in meetings, you've got tasks. Okay, that's the basic breakdown. Doesn't matter whether it's a senior manager or a business owner or an employee in an organization, everyone's got.
To continue enjoying this presentation, download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.